The city always looked different at 3 a.m., as if its pulse slowed down just enough for Cipher to hear the hidden rhythm beneath the surface. Neon signs flickered like dying stars, traffic lights changed for no one, and somewhere, behind tinted glass and steel beams, secrets waited to be taken. It was in this silence that Cipher did his best thinking. While the rest of the world slept, he studied it, dissecting its systems, anticipating its behavior, learning how to move through it unseen. His latest job had been clean. Too clean. The counterfeit poker chips which had gone off without a hitch, the math was flawless, the execution surgical. But something inside Cipher itched, restlessness disguised as ambition. He needed something bigger. Something no one in the underground could ignore. That's when the convention flyers started calling to him. It was an international tech showcase, scheduled to be held at the newly constructed Orion Tech Tower, a 65-story monolith wrapped in adaptive solar glass, powered by wind turbines, and patrolled by autonomous drone swarms. But the real prize was being announced at the end of the week, an AI-powered vault, designed by Helix Dynamics, a defense contractor turned private tech giant. It was being billed as the first intelligent security container capable of real-time decision-making, able to adapt its defenses in response to environmental, biometric, and behavioral inputs. They called it Project Sentry. Cipher stared at the early access documents he'd pulled from an unsecured press site. He was already 5 steps ahead. Sentry wasn't just a vault. It was an ecosystem. Built with self-learning neural layers, the AI wasn't programmed. It evolved. It watched, it learned, and it adjusted. But that only made Cipher more intrigued. He didn't want to destroy it. He wanted to outthink it. Inside his small workshop, an abandoned auto garage turned digital lab, Cipher sketched a rudimentary layout of Orion Tech Tower. He marked its fiber optic backbone, the emergency power failsafes, the signal routing clusters that sat beneath the server floors. He'd already scraped data from the building's construction firm using a phishing tool disguised as a contractor app. Blueprints, power maps, even temporary access codes used by testing engineers were now in his hands. As he studied the vault's promotional video for the 10th time, Cipher's eyes weren't on the speaker or the fanfare. They were on the camera angles. The spacing of security guards. The reflection of the vault's rear panel in a glass screen behind the podium. Every shadow held a clue. Every frame was a data point. He paused the video, zooming in on a blinking light behind the vault's console. There it was, a maintenance port. Hidden but not well enough. Likely used for firmware updates or emergency bypass. It was shielded by a biometric handshake, but it still existed. That meant there was a physical layer beneath all that AI brilliance. And Cipher was always good with layers. He spent the next 48 hours locked in his garage. His sleep came in short, calculated bursts, 20-minute naps timed by EEG waves monitored through a hacked sleep band. His diet, protein bars, caffeine pills, and mineral water. His focus, absolute. He built a scaled model of the Sentry Vault based on every pixel he could analyze. He ran simulations using TensorFlow-based replicas of adaptive behavior. He programmed fake intrusion attempts and watched how the model adjusted, learning which combinations caused overcompensation, triggers that forced the system to overcorrect and expose a brief vulnerability window. He didn't just want to open the vault. He wanted to teach it the wrong lesson. By day 4, Cipher had cracked the vault's communication protocol. It wasn't using traditional TCP/IP routing. It was bouncing short encrypted pulses through a proprietary mesh network. One built on a variation of Li-Fi signaling layered with quantum key exchanges. That should have made it impenetrable. But Cipher had been reading up on photonic injection techniques, ways to send false data into a system's neural layer using light interference, effectively feeding it illusions. The trick wasn't breaking the vault's defenses. It was convincing the vault that Cipher was the administrator. And for that, he needed more than code. He needed a presence inside the tower. The convention was only 6 days away. That left just enough time. He checked his secure messaging hub and opened a conversation with Reese. Cipher, I'm going in. Orion Tech Tower. Sentry Vault. Reese, you insane? That thing's not just guarded. Thinks. Cipher, I know. That's why I want it. Reese, You'll need access. Staff, VIP, whatever. That badge system's air-gapped. Cipher, already working on it. Meet me tomorrow. Midnight. Usual spot. Cipher closed the chat and leaned back, eyes heavy but focused. He glanced at the wall, covered in blueprints, sketches, string lines connecting patterns of thought. The vault wasn't just a target. It was a question. And Cipher had always loved answering questions no one else could. The next night, Cipher and Reese met in their usual spot, a half-abandoned underpass near the city's east end, where old rail lines met forgotten factories. It was a dead zone for cell service and a place few bothered to remember. Cipher liked it for the silence. Reese liked it because nobody followed him there. Cipher leaned against a rusted pillar, hoodie drawn low, eyes scanning the shadows. Reese arrived 2 minutes late, hoodie zipped, earbuds hanging loose like he'd just come from a jog. "You're serious about this?" Reese asked as he approached. Cipher didn't answer right away. He pulled out a small tablet and tapped a few times, bringing up a rendered 3D model of the Sentry Vault system. It rotated slowly, glowing in the dark. "That's not from the promo," Reese muttered. "It's from the back-end diagnostics portal," Cipher replied calmly. "Helix engineers use it to run tests. I intercepted a clone of their demo app during a staged firmware push. Wasn't hard, just had to mimic a field update request using a spoofed Mac signature." Reese let out a low whistle. "You ever think about using this stuff legally? You'd be rich." Cipher didn't smile. "Legality is just ownership wrapped in paperwork. I'm not interested in permission." Reese nodded once. He knew better than to argue with Cipher on philosophy. "So what do you need from me?" "Credentials. From a technician, not security. Someone with access to the floor below the vault, maybe server-side support. I'll spoof the ID, but I need their badge data and schedule. I'll handle the cloning." Reese thought for a second. "I might have someone. Old contact from a job we ran last year. Works subcontract for Helix, mostly does back-end hardware installs. Goes by Milo. Set up a meet." The next morning, Cipher met Milo in a rundown coffee shop with flickering lights and chipped tables. Milo looked like the type who got too comfortable behind screens, thin, hunched shoulders, nervous fingers that tapped against his cup. "I don't want trouble," Milo said first thing. "You won't get any," Cipher replied. "Just need to walk in your shoes for one day." "Literally." Milo hesitated, then slid over his ID badge, access token, and floor map of the Orion Tech Tower. "This gets you into level 58 and 59. Vault's on 60. That's all I've got." Cipher nodded, then handed him a flash drive. "This has a firmware patch for your device scanner. Plug it into your reader next time you're scanning badges. It'll create a duplicate log. Just in case they check access history, it'll look like you were there, not me." Milo stared at him, caught between awe and fear. "You really thought of everything." "Not everything," Cipher said. "Just the parts that matter." Back in his workshop, Cipher set to work. First, he created a cloned ID badge with the data scraped from Milo's chip. Then, using his custom magnetic encoder, he loaded the access logs onto a dummy RFID card. It was almost too easy. Corporate systems rarely expected internal betrayal. Cipher wasn't breaking in from the outside. He was becoming the inside. But impersonation wasn't the hardest part. The real challenge was communicating with the Vault's AI. Cipher needed a way to speak its language, binary pulses encoded in light, constantly evolving through quantum-safe encryption. But he had something special up his sleeve. Months ago, Cipher had built a tool he called Ghost Key, a modular photonic transmitter disguised inside a smartwatch. Originally meant to clone Li-Fi communication from smart traffic systems, it could now be repurposed to send microbursts of manipulated data to any light-sensitive interface. All he had to do was aim it at the maintenance panel port during a system reboot window. And thanks to the installation schedule Milo had provided, Cipher knew exactly when that window would be. The convention would feature live demonstrations of the Vault's capabilities. Between each demo, the system would perform a learning reset, essentially wiping its short-term predictive memory to ensure a consistent test experience for attendees. That wipe lasted exactly 9 seconds. 9 seconds. That was Cipher's window to inject a payload, one designed to introduce a bias into the vault's decision-making matrix. Not a virus, not a brute force hack. A suggestion. One that would subtly convince the vault that Cipher's biometric and behavioral profile matched that of a trusted engineer. To train the AI properly, Cipher needed to behave like a Helix staffer for days in advance. Walk the right way. Use the right doors. Trigger the same sensors. Appear on the same cameras. All data the AI used to build its trust heuristics. He started preparing right away. He wore Milo's uniform everywhere, even at home. Rehearsed his walking pattern. Practiced looking distracted while carrying a toolkit. Created a fake tool belt that disguised Ghost Key under a modified screwdriver. For 4 days, Cipher shadowed the tower. He walked its halls. Sat in its lobby pretending to wait for someone. Hacked into the building's vending machine firmware just to add himself to a recorded visitor log. He made himself part of the environment, predictable and forgettable. By the time the convention began, Cipher wasn't an intruder. He was a pattern. On the morning of the vault demonstration, Cipher entered the building with the rest of the tech staff. His cloned badge worked flawlessly. The security scanner blinked green. No one gave him a second glance. He reached the 59th floor, walked past the demo prep team, and paused near the vault's control room. 2 engineers chatted near the entry. One complained about the AI needing another brain scrub because it had flagged a janitor for leaning against the vault too long. Cipher didn't laugh, but he memorized that detail. He continued to the fiber control panel, pretending to check a conduit. He adjusted his watch, checked the signal. 30 seconds to reset. He made his way toward the vault's rear service entrance, where the maintenance port blinked gently under the security console. He looked around. 10 seconds. Cipher crouched, pretending to tie his boot. The hallway camera swept left. 5 seconds. He angled his wrist. A single IR beam burst forward, encoded with behavioral patterns, biometric dummy data, and his altered profile ID. 3 seconds. The beam struck the port's sensor array. 1 second. The reset completed. Cipher stood up casually and walked away. To anyone watching, he was just another technician on a schedule. But to the vault, he had just become family. Cipher didn't celebrate after the data injection. That wasn't his style. He knew better than to assume a system this sophisticated would immediately welcome him with open arms just because of one successful payload. The vault might now recognize him, but trust? That had to be earned, or simulated convincingly. The AI within the Sentry Vault wasn't a static system. It adapted. It cross-referenced behavior patterns with biometric and auditory data, analyzing everything from the rhythm of footsteps to the cadence of speech. Cipher understood it wasn't enough to mimic Milo's credentials. He had to become an entity the AI would want to grant access to, an expected presence in its ecosystem. That meant staying close, staying visible, and staying predictable. Over the next 48 hours, Cipher practically lived inside Orion Tech Tower. He moved among engineers, nodded at guards, left toolkits beside panels. He even spilled a drink in the break room once, on purpose, just to get flagged on the internal cleanup report. Every action fed the AI's internal models, reinforcing his illusion as a harmless tech. One who belonged. But it wasn't all passive mimicry. At night, Cipher worked in his hidden lab, reverse engineering chunks of Sentry's neural architecture. With his Ghost Key, he'd captured bursts of encrypted telemetry during maintenance pulses. From that data, he reconstructed a simplified simulation of the Vault's decision-making tree, a clone he could test and manipulate without ever stepping back inside. And as he studied it, Cipher saw something beautiful. The AI didn't just guard access. It ran simulations constantly, predicting threat levels, measuring entropy in human movement, evaluating intent from posture and temperature. It was like playing chess against a mind that moved in all directions at once. But Cipher knew how to play this kind of game. He identified a pattern in how the Vault flagged unusual behavior, hesitation near sensitive zones, irregular breathing near the core interface, or repeated glances at access panels. It wasn't watching for lockpicks or guns, it was watching for nerves. That gave Cipher his next idea. If the vault was watching behavior to sense intent, then Cipher could train it to see him as the opposite of a threat. A constant, someone predictable, someone boring. That meant routine, patterns, timing. So Cipher created a ritual. At exactly 10:37 a.m. and 3:19 p.m. each day, he'd pass the vault doors while whistling the same tune, 3 bars of an old blues riff, just loud enough to be picked up by ambient mics. He'd pause at the same panel, kneel to check a wire, then stand and nod toward the main security camera before walking away. Over and over. It was absurd, but the point wasn't style, it was familiarity. Repetition. He was teaching the AI to associate his presence with normalcy. To ignore him the same way most people ignore wallpaper. By day 5, Cipher didn't trigger any microflags in the security logs he monitored remotely through a concealed repeater. The AI no longer treated him as a statistical anomaly. He was officially dull. That night, back in his room, Cipher sat cross-legged on the floor, his tablet in front of him, streaming a real-time feed of the AI's predictive models. He watched as a test simulation, his own avatar, walked toward the vault's biometric panel. No alarm. No hesitation. The AI even predicted the path he would take 5 seconds in advance, almost as if it was guiding him in. Cipher smiled. The vault didn't just accept him now, it expected him. The final piece was access. He had bypassed locks and defused biometric barriers before. But this time, he wasn't going to trick the scanner, he was going to convince it. He created what he called a mirrored pulse signature. Using a layered pulse reader strapped to his inner wrist, Cipher captured a full 3-dimensional echo of Milo's heartbeat while performing a basic physical stress test. Then, with a custom waveform synthesizer he'd built during college to experiment with biometric feedback loops, Cipher layered Milo's pulse over his own. The result was a hybrid heartbeat, his own rhythm, tuned to match the biometric blueprint of a known user. Not perfect, but convincing enough to register as a match, especially when the AI already believed Cipher belonged. On the 7th day, Cipher ran one final simulation on his clone model. He approached the vault, played his audio marker, submitted his hybrid pulse, stood calmly. In the model, the vault opened. He didn't celebrate. Instead, he checked every fail-safe. What happened if someone tailed him? What if the AI performed an unscheduled scan? What if power surged mid-entry? He built dozens of scenarios, each with its own contingency plan. The key wasn't confidence. It was preparedness. At sunrise, Cipher packed his tools into a slimline technician case. Not his usual black bag, too suspicious. This one looked like something you'd find on any server floor, covered in barcode stickers and network cables. Inside was everything: the ghost key, his heartbeat emulator, a blackout dongle that could spoof a localized power dip for 15 seconds, and, just in case, his emergency cutout device, a high-frequency signal generator designed to fry one node of the AI's sensory grid without triggering a system-wide alarm. He looked at himself in the mirror before heading out. 22 years old. Hoodie replaced with a branded Orion Tech uniform. Short-trimmed hair. Neutral expression. Calm eyes. To anyone watching, he was just a support tech heading in for a system sweep. But beneath that calm exterior was the mind of a tactician who had mapped every inch of the tower, reverse-engineered an adaptive AI, and transformed himself into a ghost the system would trust. Tonight, he would walk through the vault's doors, not as a thief breaking in, but as someone invited. The true heist was never about the door. It was about what the door believed. The night felt unusually still. Cipher stood outside Orion Tech Tower under the dim glow of smart streetlights that adjusted brightness based on human presence. The sky was clear, the moon hanging like a faded coin in the dark. His technician case rested at his side, looking perfectly mundane, just another tool in the hands of another faceless employee. Except tonight, Cipher wasn't just a tech. He was a narrative, crafted, trained, inserted into the neural pathways of the most advanced AI vault system in the world. And now, it was time to see if the story he'd told the machine had been convincing enough. He entered through the side access hall at 11:52 p.m. A late-night maintenance call had been scheduled in the system, Another breadcrumb he'd planted earlier in the week. His ID badge passed the scanner. Green light. No pause. No hesitation. The front desk AI assistant, named Argus, pinged a polite welcome on a nearby screen. Evening, Milo. Security logs confirm your vault diagnostic task. Proceed with caution. Security protocols are in passive observation mode. Cipher nodded. Of course. He kept his voice measured and low, knowing microphones would still be active even in passive mode. He moved through the lobby with casual efficiency, every footstep rehearsed, every motion deliberate. He took the freight elevator, the one rarely used unless moving server racks or heavy tools. It bypassed the open-floor offices and led straight to the sublevel where the vault was located. On the ride down, Cipher glanced at his reflection in the elevator's brushed steel panel. Focused. Not a trace of nerves. As the doors slid open, Cipher stepped into a long, glass-walled hallway flanked by glowing blue conduits humming with low energy. Ahead was the heart of the AI vault system, a reinforced chamber encased in carbon fiber mesh and embedded with reactive sensors. A biometric podium stood at the center, like a gatekeeper to a digital kingdom. He approached slowly. Every second mattered. Every breath counted. Cipher reached into his jacket and pressed the hidden activation switch on his biometric emulator. The pulse signature he'd synthesized earlier hummed to life, syncing with his heartbeat in real time. He adjusted his stance, exact posture, even breathing, normal eye movement. Just another tech doing his job. He placed his hand on the scanner. There was a moment, barely noticeable, where the system hesitated. A blip in the recognition algorithm. Cipher held steady, eyes straight ahead. The AI was thinking, calculating. Running data through millions of neurons, comparing behavior and biometric input. Then, the chamber light shifted from blue to white. Identity confirmed, the AI said in its neutral tone. Access granted, Milo Trainer. Welcome to Level 3 Core. The vault door split down the center and opened silently, revealing a cool, sterile chamber inside. No golden glow. No stacks of money. Just data, pure, encrypted information in drives secured inside motion-sensitive cases, suspended in magnetic isolation chambers. Information more valuable than gold. Patent archives, prototype schematics, quantum algorithm repositories, next-gen drone firmware. Cipher walked in, careful not to let his heart rate spike. He moved to the left side of the room, Zone B, where Orion's proprietary AI security modules were stored in custom-made gel drives. These weren't just files. They were neural templates, unfinished AI models worth millions. Unregistered. Experimental. Black-budget material. He knew exactly which drive to take. Module C7. A learning framework designed to manipulate swarm robotics using predictive behavioral modeling. In the wrong hands, it could control drones, vehicles, even surveillance networks. In Cipher's hands, it would be something more. He reached into his case and removed a decoy drive identical in shape, weight, and magnetic profile. He slid it into the chamber's reader while his left hand performed the extraction with silent precision. Swap complete. Then came the noise, a soft chirp. The AI's voice returned. Unusual pattern detected. Please verify intent. Cipher's fingers twitched near his hidden pulse emitter. He didn't panic. Instead, he took a slow breath and responded exactly as Milo would. Standard checksum readback. Bitrate spike due to EM interference in the hallway. You'll see a log from last week. It happened during cooling cycle maintenance. The system paused again. Cipher felt the static in the air, pressure, like the machine was watching him harder now. His heart pounded, but the emulator smoothed the rhythm into a pattern the AI wouldn't flag. Confirmed. Previous interference logs match anomaly. Resuming passive mode. Cipher exhaled silently. He sealed the technician case, now carrying a drive worth tens of millions. On the way out, he activated his blackout dongle, a tiny USB plug disguised as a flash drive. It pulsed once, sending a signal into the sensor grid that mimicked a power fluctuation. For 15 seconds, every camera along his path dropped into buffering mode. Enough time to leave no digital footprint. Cipher retraced his steps through the hallway, into the elevator, and back to the lobby. Argus didn't even look up. He swiped out at the exit, logging a job complete tag into the system. At 12:37 a.m., he stepped out into the night. Cool air hit his face as the door clicked shut behind him. Cipher walked 3 blocks before ducking into a waiting rideshare, paid in crypto, registered under a spoofed identity. He didn't speak to the driver. Just watched the city lights blur past the window. Back in his lab, Cipher opened the drive. Raw code. Neural matrices. Synthetic memory structures. He wasn't just holding a theft. He was holding evolution. He carefully backed up the contents, encrypted the drive twice, then placed it inside a lead-lined lockbox beneath the floorboards. Cipher sat back, the glow of his monitors washing across his face. He didn't smile, not yet. Instead, he turned to the whiteboard on the wall, where his next plan was already forming. A series of government contractors had just signed a deal to trial biometric detection body armor that read threats before they happened. Cipher's eyes narrowed. Let's see how well it reads me. The game was only getting bigger, and Cipher had already rewritten the rules.